Okay, wait, is it recording? Perfect. Hi everyone. So today we're I can't do this today.
She had 200,000 followers who believed her life was perfect. What none of them knew was that the woman smiling in that photo had been crying on her kitchen floor 90 seconds earlier, and that the version of her life she'd built her entire career on wasn't just curated. It was a performance she no longer knew how to stop. Welcome to Fresh Start Stories, inspiring stories about life, change, and the courage to begin again. Like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Jess Whitfield's kitchen was, by any objective measure, beautiful. White oak cabinets, a marble island she'd saved for 8 months to afford, morning light that fell through the window in exactly the way that made her coffee mug photograph well. It was also, at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning, the place where Jess sat on the floor with her back against the cabinets, silently crying in a way that made no sound at all, a skill she had perfected over the last year without ever deciding to learn it. 90 seconds earlier, she had been standing at that same marble island, camera propped against a stack of cookbooks, laughing at something that hadn't actually been funny, holding up a mug that said, "Mama needs coffee," for an audience of 200,000 people who had never seen her kitchen floor. She did not know, sitting there, what exactly had cracked. It wasn't one thing. It rarely is. But something had, and she let herself have exactly 4 minutes on the floor before she stood up, checked her reflection in the toaster's chrome surface, and went to wake her daughter for school. If you had asked anyone who followed Jess Whitfield online, and plenty of people did, mothers mostly, women in their late 20s and 30s who screenshotted her captions and saved her morning routine reels, they would have described her life in words like effortless, aspirational, together. 3 years earlier, Jess had been an unremarkable elementary school teacher with a mommy blog nobody read. Then one post about a homemade birthday cake had gone unexpectedly viral, and within 18 months, she had quit teaching to do this, whatever this was, full-time. She told herself in the early days that the content was simply a slightly polished version of the truth. A few extra throw pillows, a caption written after the fact instead of during. It was only gradually, the way most erosion happens gradually, that the gap between the version of her life she posted and the actual texture of her days had widened into something she no longer knew how to name out loud. Her husband Marcus noticed before she did, in the particular way partners notice things they're afraid to say directly. He'd started sleeping later on weekends, not because he was tired, but because the sound of Jess resetting a spontaneous pancake breakfast for the third take at 7 a.m. had become something he quietly dreaded. They didn't fight about it. They didn't talk about it either. There was, Jess sometimes thought, an entire second marriage happening in the silences between the one they actually had. Her daughter Lily, 6 years old, had started asking a question that Jess had no good answer for. Are we filming, or is this real? She asked it constantly now, before bedtime stories, during breakfast, once, memorably, in the middle of a genuine unposed laugh they were sharing over an inside joke, as though even Lily could no longer instinctively tell the difference, and needed to check. The morning of the kitchen floor was not, Jess would later understand, really about the kitchen floor at all. It was about a message that had arrived in her inbox the night before, from a follower she didn't know, a young mother named Ashley who had written in the specific unguarded way people write to strangers online at 2 a.m, that she had started trying to recreate Jess's life for her own 2 kids, the routines, the schedule, the calm, endlessly patient version of motherhood Jess performed, and that she felt like she was failing at something Jess made look effortless, and that some days she didn't know if she wanted to keep going. Jess read the message 4 times. She did not sleep well. She did not know yet that this message was the beginning of something that would eventually force her to look directly at the exact thing she had spent 3 years carefully not looking at. She posted the pancake video anyway. It performed well. The comments were warm, effusive, full of heart emojis and women saying they wished they had mornings like hers. She read every single one, sitting on her actual kitchen floor for the second time that week, and felt something that was not quite guilt and not quite grief, but shared a border with both. It was Marcus who finally said something, 3 days later, not as an accusation but almost helplessly, watching her refilm a family game night for the 4th time because the lighting hadn't been right. "Jess," he said quietly, "when's the last time we played a game that wasn't for the camera?" She didn't have an answer. She realized, standing there, that she genuinely could not remember. She didn't quit that night or announce anything dramatic. What she did instead was smaller and harder. She wrote back to Ashley. Not a curated response, not advice, just the truth. That the calm mornings were retakes, that the patience was edited, that she herself had been sitting on her kitchen floor more mornings than not, for longer than she wanted to admit, and that if Ashley was struggling, it wasn't because she was failing at a life Jess had actually built. It was because nobody's real life looks like a highlight reel, including Jess's. She almost didn't send it. She sent it anyway. Ashley wrote back within the hour, and something in her message, relief mostly, the specific relief of being told the truth by someone she'd assumed had none of her own struggles, stayed with Jess for days. She found herself, without quite deciding to, screenshotting parts of their exchange, wondering what it would mean to say some version of this publicly. To 200,000 people who had built an image of her she was no longer sure she recognized. It took her another 6 weeks to actually do it. When she finally posted, no cookbook backdrop, no marble island filmed in bad morning light at her actual kitchen table with yesterday's dishes still in the sink, she said simply that most of what she'd shared for 3 years had been a performance, that she was exhausted in ways she hadn't let herself admit, and that she didn't fully know yet what her platform would look like if she stopped pretending. She did not dress it up as a triumphant reinvention. She did not know, posting it, whether it would end her career or save it. What she felt, hitting post, was not relief exactly. It was something quieter and more fragile, the specific, unfamiliar sensation of being seen by strangers in a way she had spent 3 years carefully preventing. The response was not universal praise. Some followers left. A few were unkind, accusing her of manufacturing a new angle for engagement, which stung more than she expected, given how carefully she'd almost talked herself out of posting at all. But far more people, hundreds of them, then thousands, wrote back with some version of the same thing Ashley had written: relief, recognition, the particular gratitude of someone who had needed permission to stop performing and hadn't known they were waiting for it. Marcus found her on the kitchen floor again that evening, phone in hand, scrolling through the comments. He sat down next to her, not saying anything at first, just sitting on the actual floor of their actual kitchen. "How do you feel?" he finally asked. Jess thought about it for a long moment before she answered, honestly, that she didn't fully know yet, that it felt less like an ending and more like the first true thing she'd said to all of them in 3 years, and that she was still figuring out what came after telling the truth. She didn't have a 5-year plan for what her platform would become. She didn't have a redemption arc ready to package into a highlight reel. What she had, for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, was an actual Tuesday morning with her husband and her daughter that wasn't being filmed, wasn't being edited, and didn't need to be anything other than exactly what it was. Lily wandered in a few minutes later, still in pajamas, and climbed into both their laps at once, the way she used to before "Are we filming?" became a question she needed to ask. "Are we filming?" she asked anyway, out of habit. "No, baby," Jess said, and meant it in a way she hadn't meant much of anything in a long time. "This one's just for us. If you've ever kept a smile on so long you forgot what your real face felt like, at work, online, in front of people who needed you to be okay, this one's for you. The version of yourself you're performing isn't the only one worth showing. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't building a better mask. It's finally taking it off in front of someone. If this story reminded you that it's okay to stop pretending you're fine, hit subscribe. We've got more stories like Jess is waiting for you. Thank you for watching.